Today's guest is a founder of Trust ED, a framework for business, organization, and school improvement focused on developing trusted leaders. He is also an executive consultant, an adjunct professor, and an experienced teacher and a school administrator. Welcome to the show, Dr. Travis. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing just splendid. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your presence here right now. Thanks so much for
Great
joining
to
me on this
talk with another
episode.
Toby.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just telling you about that. That I found it so fascinating that we both bear Toby. Yours with a Y and mine with I with I. And I was like, yeah, it's still the same way to pronounce it. Thank you so much, Dr. Travis or Toby, for joining me on this episode. I really appreciate it. I would just love to kick off with your life story and your life journey so far, your career journey also. Like you are the founder of Trust ED, and you're a professor, you're an executive consultant, experienced teacher, school administrator. So I'd love you to share a little bit about your life, your career journey, what inspired you to go into academics, into education, and also helping school leaders assess, establish, protect, and maintain high levels of trust through the K-12 school improvement and reform.
It's a big question. Kind of the short. I think the short answer. How did I end up in the education field? I think really have to just give credit to teachers and mentors that I had in my youth, and then on through my adult life. And seeing the impact and the influence of education, and really, you look at every endeavor in the world is influenced through education,
Hmm.
and it doesn't matter what your profession, doesn't matter what your sector that you're working in.
Yeah.
All of those are influenced through what happens in schools. And so the vital importance of what's going on in education is critical to the future of humanity. It's been said the world of tomorrow is walking in the hallways of schools today. And it sounds a little hokey, but it's really true. And so that vital importance. And so that influence of teachers in my life, I think motivated me to get involved as a teacher. And so that's probably the motivating factor there. The issue of trust, which, yes, it became part of my doctoral dissertation. I've written a book and very key element in the consulting and the training that I do and the leadership. Frankly, we talk about it all the time. I'm currently a school superintendent as well. And just realizing, not just only through the research, but through personal experience and observation for years. But I'll give you one statistic, Toby, and that says the number one indicator of successful schools, and this is also true in organizations, and the corporate sector even, the number one indicator of success is high levels of trusted leadership. And for example, excuse me, in my research, we were able to identify a direct correlation between student achievement levels, teacher retention, community volunteerism, and a whole other list of school benefits are directly tied and influenced by the level of trust in the school's leadership. Well, then you jump over to the corporate sector and you see the exact same types of results, although their benefits look a little bit different. But literally, the companies, the organizations where they have the highest levels of retention of quality employees, where they have the highest levels of innovation, those kinds of indicators and benefits to organizations are directly influenced and tied. There's a direct correlation to the level of trust and leadership. And so my work and passion really has been in the field of, well, how do we assess trust? So how do we even get our arms and minds around this very, fluid kind of topic? A lot of people think, well, trust is just a soft skill. Either you have it or you don't. And actually, nothing could be further from the truth. Those that are trusted are very intentional about it, about developing it, protecting it. And then what are the specific skill sets and competencies to have in place in order for high levels of trust to exist. And so that's the work that I currently try to model as best I can. And we all have points of failure. But then the work that I do in walking alongside, especially school leaders, and I also work in the nonprofit sector and a little bit in the corporate sector, but mostly my work is focused primarily in the education sector, but it's transferable. And I think this is why, the book has gotten so much attention, and Forbes picking up a number of articles with me recently, and which was a big surprise to me. I'm like, why in the world would, they're listening to this academic, but it's because these truths they are universal. The application is universal. Trust is critical for all relationships, but especially in leadership of organizations, schools, and businesses.
Yes, and that's why I'm so excited to be speaking with you today, because you combine very essential elements of life, like education and school, which is very, very important, and also trust. We need trust for everything, like you said already, and and leadership too. We need to be leaders of our own lives, leaders of our organization, leaders of family, leaders of everything possible. That's so. Those are very essential. How will I say, building stones of our lives. And I love the fact that you were talking about that a trusted leader reflects or has this direct relationship with the performance of students and the performance of employees, for example. Can you explain this relationship to us a little bit better?
Sure. So again, if it's easiest for me to talk about it in school terms, but there are, again, universal applications. But think about it this way: in a school, often we look at what's typically seen as the highest measure of success or student achievement levels. So if we want high levels of student achievement, well, what do we know creates the setting, if you will, an educational learning environment that creates the highest levels of student achievement? What we find is it's when students are engaged and self-motivated. So then we have to look, okay, what creates the highest level of student engagement and student motivation, self-efficacy in the classroom. And what we have found through the research and practice is it's all about trusted teachers. So if students have a trusted relationship with their teacher, students get more engaged. And when they have high levels of engagement, you have higher levels of student achievement. Well, now keep backing it up. Now we have to look at, okay, if teachers are the most critical element of a student's learning, which they are, what are the factors that keep teachers engaged and motivated? Because that's the other piece of this. You have to have teachers who are highly engaged, highly self-motivated, that are innovative, that are passionate about the classroom. Well, the number one factor is a trusted relationship between the teacher and their school administrator.
Yes.
And that's where, again, this direct tie back. So then if we can ensure, that leaders in the school, so the principals, the division heads, the department heads, that these are people who are trained, assessed, trained, monitored around this area of competency and high levels of trust and trusted skill sets. This is what creates, again, that direct line to how students achieve. And if we don't spend our time and effort in ensuring that's the case, then what we see the majority of time, so it happens, it's so predictable. If schools are not investing in the professional development of their leadership to be highly trusted, then it doesn't matter what school improvement initiatives they're doing, the vast majority fail if you skip that step. And it goes, again, if your listeners are working in the business, small business, large business, we've seen that research for years. And this is why Fortune 100 companies spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in trust management or trust development in the professional development of their managers and their execs. This is there's lots of resources that are spent on this because they know the critical truth of you've got to have trusted leaders. And again, there are very specific and well-known behaviors and skill sets that must be in place for trust to be high. But the return on investment is huge. In fact, there's a study I recently saw that was showing that for every dollar an organization spends on the professional development of trust or well-being of their employees, especially their leadership, there's a return, a financial return of anywhere from $1.50 to, I think it was $6.50 per dollar spent. So actually they were able to measure the financial return on investment. If you spend money developing your staff, your leaders especially, to be trusted leaders, you'll actually make a lot more money. So even from a business sector, it comes down to, why is this important? Because it's how the bottom line gets impacted in the end.
Yes. And I would love us just step into that already. Like, how can we become better trusted leaders? Like, can you teach us those, skill set and those behaviors that we need to learn? I know you talked about them in your book, Trust ED, which is available on Amazon. And as you said already, that's been noticed by Forbes, for example, and it was the book of the month in month of November. And that other website and organization have picked it up and said, yes, this book has a lot of information that we need, to become better trusted leaders. But Dr. Travis or Toby, I would love you to just share a little bit about the behaviors that we need to learn and the skill set that we need to learn to become better trusted leaders.
Well, the first step is always the ability and willingness to be reflective. The very first step of becoming a trusted individual or a trusted leader is allowing yourself to be evaluated and allowing others to speak into your life. Being able to look in the mirror and reflect on, is my practice, are my behaviors, are my managerial skills, if you will, those that build and develop trust. Do I trust my team? One of the things that we have discovered is the more that you extend trust, the more you're trusted. This is why, we've heard for years people complain about micromanagers. Yeah, rightly so. Micromanagement means you've hired the wrong people. If I have to micromanage you, I've hired the wrong person. Right. Yes. So, where do you start? You start by self-reflection. I'm a bit of a data geek, to be honest. Now, maybe that's partly because, again, I'm an academic, but I also believe the other critical step is you have to have an assessment. You have to. That's why we developed a 360 a number of years ago on this very topic. Is we looked at all the research, we looked at what are the critical behaviors and skill sets, and then developed an assessment tool. So we've got some data to tell us, okay, there are actually 6 components of trusted leadership. They're kind of categories of trust, because trust is complex. It's not just, trust isn't just about consistency or just about values. There's a complexity to it. And so we use an assessment tool of where are leaders, where am I, as I'm reflecting, and we survey our employees to speak into my leadership and tell me, how do you think I'm doing? Because what we've also learned, Toby, is that perception is reality. When we're talking about assessing trust levels, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with what our employees are saying or not, their perception is their reality. And that's kind of where trust lives. So the first place is, okay, I've got to be open to be assessed and reflective. And so it's a mindset. And then I need tools to assess my trust level. Yeah. And then I need resources to develop. So once I identify, right, I am lacking, for example, one of the skill sets is listening. And okay, I am lacking in my listening skills. Well, that's a trainable skill. There are practical steps that I can, and I'm not the only one. I mean, there's wonderful books out there on the lost art of listening and some others that have been out there for years. But that would be an example of, we can drill down to, okay, what is a skill set or behavior that I need to get better at? And then we get better at it. And then we develop action plans and professional development, resourcing, training, reading, whatever it takes to build up that skill set. And we put it into place, we put it in action, and then we reassess. And I'm a big believer in short-term goals. I do strategic planning with school boards and others, and we do long-term planning. But for school improvement or organizational improvement, what really counts are short-term goals. It's, okay, let's identify a need, let's create a strategy to address it, let's measure it, and then let's set a goal that we can fulfill within a matter of months. Yeah. Let's go. Let's change. And this is how schools and organizations get better, is with short increments of improvement. It's also how you build a positive culture. If you can give your organization quick wins, it creates a vibe. It's like, oh, this is a growing, happening place. This is getting better and better, and I want to be a part of this. And it fuels an environment of positivity that people want to be in. And this is why retention rates go way down in those kind of environments. People don't want to leave. It's no longer primarily about the money necessarily or the benefits. It's, no, I love this place. I want to work in this environment. So that, that's some of the payoff. Anyway, that was a long answer to your question. Where do we start? Self-reflective, assess it, get strategic, get into the weeds. What specifically do I need to do better? And maybe it's, well, I could give all kinds of examples, but that's, again, listening is one of those specific skill sets that trusted leaders are really, really good at.
Yes. Can you teach us how to listen better? Like, if I want to learn how to listen better, how can I do that? Can you share some quick tricks or some, tips on how to listen and understand better?
Yeah, so, quick trick is stop talking.
Oh, okay.
Right? So when you're listening, it's eye contact, if it's culturally appropriate. And I realize, we're talking to probably an international audience, and that does vary from culture to culture. But in a North American culture, it would be, okay, am I making eye contact with the person that I'm listening to? I use a little acrostic that I developed in my own practice years ago with the word listen. And so, the L is I'm looking. It's the power of the eyes. So I'm looking at the individual. I'm not looking anywhere else. I'm being inquisitive. I'm asking questions. I'm not going to solutions yet. I am making sure I'm understanding. So I'm initiating questions of clarity. So when you say this, is this what you mean? And you're interested. So you're also acknowledging to the person that you're talking to that you really are taking in what they're saying, and you're asking for clarity. The S is stay focused. Put the phone on silence, right?
Yes.
Stop looking at the clock on the wall. If you've got a door, that you can close, it's stay focused. The T is give them your time. One of the things that communicates value more than anything else in a relationship is time. I value you and I value our time together, and I am not going to rush this. Now, in an organizational setting, I'm a busy administrator. I do have to often say, as people come in to meet with me, I'll say, I'm really glad you're here. I've got a 40-minute window that we can talk. Let's talk. This 40 minutes is yours, and you give them as much time as you can. E is empathy. And here, what you want to focus on is just being as empathetic as you can be. And it doesn't mean you're in agreement necessarily. I might have a frustrated parent or a student or an employee in here, and they're upset and they're burning mad about some issue. And I might even disagree with them as far as, what they're arguing for. But what I can say and mean it authentically is, this must be very difficult for you. I can see this has hurt you badly. And I can be empathetic. And this is part of hearing people's pain. And often people a friend of mine calls it verbal vomiting. They just need to get it out, and they need a safe place to do it. And they've chosen your office to do it for whatever reason.
Yes.
Let them do it. It's okay. I have another friend who was a mentor of mine. He would put on this imaginary bib. You wouldn't know, but he would do this motion with his hands, wiping down to his front. And I learned later what he was doing. He was literally putting on a bib in his imagination so that people could vomit all over him verbally. And he would just sit there and listen and take it. And he wouldn't try to correct them. He would just say, is there anything else you want to share? Let me hear it all, and just let them go. And it's amazing when you let people do that. Sometimes that's really all they needed. They just needed to get it out and have somebody in authority hear them. And then you can invite them into the solution. It's like, so where do you think this should go? What do you think should be next? And to finish my acrostic, so then the N is the non-verbal. There have been some studies, and there's been some debates about these studies, but there are studies that suggest that people only will recall less than 10% of what is said in a conversation, but 90% of what they will remember is the nonverbal. So, your posture, again, the eye contact. If I try to have a conversation with you, but I'm sitting back in my chair with my arms crossed and my legs crossed, what is that communicating, right? So, no, just like, we've learned doing virtual meetings like this, I've got to frame my head in the right part of the screen, right? It's for me to communicate and engage in our conversation. There are some nonverbal things that are going on here. Well, that's a listening skill as well. And so those would be some tricks of the trade, if you will, to be just in developing a skill set. And what I do in professional training sessions then with leadership teams is we actually practice this. We'll create role play situations of problems that employees or students or parents have, and then as administrators we will role play implementing this listen acrostic and look how it changes where we do meetings. So that's another trick, is make sure you're choosing the right location for the right conversation. And there are conversations that are perfectly appropriate to happen in the hallway or by the water cooler or whatever that might be. But there are other conversations really need to be in a private location, or maybe it's if it's more of a coaching conversation, it's alongside the employees side in a workplace, in their work environment. So in a school, maybe in the teacher's classroom. It kind of think about what is the purpose of the conversation, and then think about the environment to support that conversation. Another piece of that is the method of communication. Well, probably an area that I've spent a lot of work on with client schools is talking about their grievance policies and what they allow for the use of text messaging and emails. And what we have found is if you do not permit employees to submit grievances via email or text, it creates actually a very positive environment because people misbehave all the time with their fingers, things that would never come out of their mouths. Now, document your grievance, but respect each other as people and come and have a face-to-face conversation, or at least a phone conversation. And so, again, these are some of the tricks of the trade. How do you increase trust? Is learn to behave when it comes to text messaging and emails, and treat people like people.
Yes, thank you so much. I mean, I really appreciate you breaking down that listing to us, and I can also affirm or confirm that before we started this conversation, you put your phone on silent and you said, "Let me put off everything and just let's focus on this conversation we're about to have right now." That's one key lesson I learned even before pressing on recording from you. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, thanks so much for making sure that this time that we're sharing together is very valuable, and we'll appreciate it. That's awesome. That's beautiful. Yeah. And you also talked about the tools that we use to assess our leadership, like for school leaders also, for example. Like, can you talk or elaborate more on these tools? How can we assess ourselves? How can we know if we are truly trusted leaders, or if we have even improved in our development?
There's a data collection organization or company that I work with a lot called School Right, LLC, and they are data management experts and survey experts, and they've got a marvelous team. And it's not a commercial. I love their team, and I've been very, very blessed and benefited by the work that they do. And I've helped create a number of assessments that they implement. But through, through a company like School Right, and they service schools around the world, and not just schools, but primarily schools. We have what's called the Trusted School Leader 360. And again, this is a research-based, validated survey instrument around trust. And this is sent out to employees of school leaders, and then the school leaders are typically it's assessing a leadership team with the feedback from their employees. It will give us a score on 6 components of trust, and we can then through that data develop very personalized and customized professional development and school improvement planning. Now, there are other tools that are out there. We actually have, there's a version of the Trusted Leader assessment for non-academic leaders. So it works for a business leader or corporation leaders, or a non-academic school leader. So maybe like your facilities manager, you want to do an assessment of their leadership of their maintenance and custodial crew. That survey will do that. We actually have a tool for teachers, even in the classroom. How trusted are they? Now, that one is a self-assessment tool, but it still is a great conversation starter. There are organizations. Well, Jim Collins, I'm sure you're familiar with the Good to Great organization, and I know that they have assessment tools. Out of Minneapolis, there's the Trust Edge Leadership Institute, led by David Horsager. David wrote a wonderful book called Trust Edge. Actually, he's got a new book out, and I'm blanking on the title right now, but highly endorse his work with companies and organizations. In fact, he was part of my inspiration years ago to go into the doctoral research on trust in school leadership. But they have tools as well for assessing trust levels. And if I can be of any assistance, to your listeners, just encourage them to reach out to me, and I can point them in direction of where to find these tools. But it's important to use research-based professional tools. One of the mistakes that's happened, and it's well intended, and I don't mean to be critical of any company or service, but with the popularity of things like Google Survey, and Survey Monkey, these are fine if you're trying to get some information back. And when does everybody want to meet for the family reunion? But, or how many want chicken? How many want beef? How many want a vegetarian option? Those kind of surveys, absolutely, those tools are great. But when we're looking for this kind of information, you really need a research-based and validated instrument to give the specific data. So leave it to the professionals. Yes, I get it. It costs money. Okay, spend the money. You're going to get a return on this like you won't believe if you actually use the data. So my counsel is, whether you go to School Right or Good to Great or Trust Edge Institute, spend the money, and you will see a great return if you use the data. And there's the next caveat is, we can get you the data on your trust level. The next is, you're going to have a willingness and commitment to follow through with using the data to inform and change your organizational and personal practices.
Yeah, and you also help people, to follow these steps, or follow the guidelines of using the data. Also, does Trust ED do that also?
Right. So the Trust Ed framework, which is really what the book is all about, again, is looking at the complexities of trust. I've already referenced, we know that there are at least 6 components of trust. I use an analogy of a bridge throughout the book to talk about how do we visualize this, because trust is complex. If we were playing a word game with your listeners, I say trust, you think of what? Well, and we opened up a chat box, it would just flow with all kinds of nuances. So what we know is it is complex. So what we need to do is break it down into, again, areas of clarity, so that we know how to address it. So, for example, and I'll just give one example, but every bridge has a foundation. Well, what's the foundation of trusted leadership? Beliefs and values. So a place to start with leaders is, okay, what are your beliefs and values about leadership? What are your beliefs and values about your organization, your company, your service, your product? What are your beliefs and values about who your employees are? In the school setting, what are your beliefs and values about the role of the teacher and the role of the parent and the role of the student? Are these articulated? Are they known? Are they visible? And this is the foundation. Do we know what we believe? Have we articulated our values? And then the substructure of a bridge is there for connecting every element of the bridge to the foundation. Well, this is key in leadership. Once we know and have articulated what our beliefs and values are we then being consistent with all of our values, or excuse me, all of our practices, all of our procedures, how we operate, our norms as an organization? Are they truly connected to our foundation, to our beliefs and values? And so there you go. Those are just, two of the 6 components that we can look at. Part of my work as a consultant, one of the first things I will do with, say, a school who's reached out to me, they've recognized they got some trust issues between administration and the faculty. How do we get to a better place? I'll say, well, send me your school handbook and send me your employee handbook. And the first thing I'm going to do, and it doesn't take me to do this, anyone can do this, Tui, is go through your policies as an organization and identify, do you have any policies that are written, created, and based on assumption that I'm not trusting my employee? And if you are intentionally creating an atmosphere of distrust, well, no wonder you've got a toxic environment. So that's a place to start. Is, are we, if we say, no, we hire the best, we trust our teachers to be professionals, but then you don't treat them as professionals. Yeah, this is where trust is lost.
I love that, because I was about to ask you that, for example, if our employees or if our friends, in any kind of way want to take it, if they start losing that trust in us, what can we do in order to restore that trust? What can we do to restore the belief also? Yeah,
there's a whole chapter in the book called Restoring the Bridge, and it's this idea of, okay, what needs to be in place? And we have actually learned that there are 4 what I call commitments in the book that we must make in order for trust to be restored. But really, the most important element is really quite simple. It's make promises and keep them. Make promises and keep them. So how do we build trust? Well, by doing what we say we would do. Well, how do you restore trust? So then how do you get strategic about that? So if I'm in a coaching conversation with a leader who has broken trust, I'll say, okay, what is something that you can do, something you can deliver to your employees in the next few weeks or months? Again, a short term, not a long-term payoff. What's something that you can do, something that would benefit them or benefit the organization or the school, that you can deliver on in a relatively short amount of time, and that you can make a promise and keep it? And then keep repeating that. Make a promise, keep it. Make a promise, keep it. This is how trust is restored. And it's not rocket science. It's consistency.
Yes, I love that word, consistency, which is also a challenge on its own.
If I may, let me make a broader application or more personal application, because I know your listeners aren't just school leaders or business leaders. Relationally, right? It's like, okay, if I'm restoring and trying to get in a better place with my spouse, right? It's, hey, sweetheart, I will do the groceries this week, and I do it. Hey, don't worry about the dog this week. I've got the dog covered. And do it. Feed the dog, walk the dog, right? It's pick up the poop, right? It's make the promise and do it. And this is how trust is restored and built.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Like, you talked about consistency, and that's like a challenge on its own, like being consistent. I mean, I could tell my sweetheart, I'm going to, watch over the dog, and I'll do it this week, and next week I'm like, I'm back to my old self. And that could be challenging. Are there like some ways you work on your consistency, like from your experience so far? Are there ways or things you do in order to stay consistent in your work?
Well, again, I would go back to just keep assessing. So every time we implement an action plan, whatever that might look like, is then go back and reassess. So, think about in the school world, why do we use regular standardized benchmarks? It's not necessarily to penalize students, certainly, but rather to see, are they on track? where they need to be. Well, the same thing. We need to regularly assess and keep that going. That doesn't stop. So it's not, oh, I assess my trust level today and put it in an action plan and I'm done. No, the best organizations, the best leaders will at minimum do some sort of trust assessment twice a year. And so you've got time to, okay, let's assess, let's action plan, let's put it into, let's do the work, and then let's reassess, and let's see if there's been an improvement, and then let's do it again, and then we do it again, and then we do it again. So it's having that long-term commitment to continually build our proficiency as leaders in the skills and competencies of trusted leadership. And that never stops. So it's one of those, it should be a regular part of our practice and our behavior. And I would say the same thing again in relationships, right? So it doesn't have to be in a formal setting or a formal tool. It can be, again, talking with your family or your significant other. How are we doing? How am I doing? Is there something I could be doing better to contribute to the health of our relationship? And be open and listen and take it in. And so that I would say that what is the next step? Keep assessing and keep doing it.
Yes. And if we keep on assessing and we notice, we'll get to a point where we notice that, yes, we need to do some restructuring. We need to move some things around. Like how can we go about this? How can we go about, for example, organizational restructuring in order to ensure that the employees and the workers and the schools, the students and everyone is okay and performing properly? What can we do and how can we do it?
Yeah, part of my studies years ago was in something called span of control theory. And it sounds really, kind of highbrow academics. It's really not. It's really about how many people are too many people for an individual to manage and support. It's really what that span of control theory is talking about. And I prefer the language span of influence. So how many people can I work with effectively as a supervisor or as a manager? And let me give a negative example first. I go back years ago when I was a high school principal. And this is still very typical in many North American education settings. I had 46 direct reports, and I had 46 teachers, faculty, and staff members who were reporting to me as the principal.
Wow.
Well, how in the world can anyone effectively support 46 people? It is just not possible. Literally, I was set up for failure as an organizational structure. And the most effective structures we find is team leaders are leading no more than 6 to maybe 10 on the outset of individuals. So when you look at how do we restructure our organization, make sure that no one is leading teams of no more than 6 to 10 people. And it varies from industry to industry. So if you're in manufacturing, okay, that might look a little bit different. If you've got a floor manager and he's got 20, 30 people on the line, yeah, maybe, okay. But even there, I think you've got to segment those lines out so that you've got line leaders. Disperse the leadership out to a point where you've got teams of no more than 6 to 10 people working. My job as a school superintendent is not to manage the 100 teachers that are here, right? My job is to support and encourage our principals and our department and division heads. And that is my role as superintendent. Yes, I'm the boss, right? I'm the vision leader. But really, my job is a support job. My job is to try to anticipate the needs of my principals, to run out there and meet those needs before they're frustrated, help solve their problems, run interference, solve budgets. It's making sure the wheels are on the bus and things are rolling. But it's a relatively small group. For them, they need to be developing assistant principals. They need to be developing department heads and division leaders. That again, people are working in these smaller teams. When we see that happen, we see much higher levels of engagement. We see greater levels of innovation. Again, we see higher levels of just well-being. It's just that's a nicer place to work. So
Yes.
that would be kind of a general overview to organizational restructuring that supports higher levels of trust.
Yes. So that means, for us to, not for us to serve properly, we have to like reduce that capacity, or that number of people that we know that we are being leaders over, so that we can oversee them properly and effectively serve them properly. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I'll just love to ask, like, if a leader notices that, okay, is going maybe in the wrong direction, for example, or he has gone in the wrong direction for a long period of time, like, are there like some ways to right the wrongs that's been done in the past? Are there some ways to get back on track, even though a lot of people have been complaining and all that? Yeah.
Well, sometimes as we know, you've got to make sure you've got the right people on the bus. So it may mean you've got to get some people off the bus. Sometimes, one of the things I talk about in the book is on restoring trust, there is a caveat here. What we've seen in the research is trust can be restored. And there are 4 commitments or pathways and practices to ensure that, with one major exception. If I have a failure of trust with my employees through a specific behavior that was wrong, and I own it, and I say, hey, I blew it. That was wrong. Forgive me. I will never do that again. And I never do it again. And I make promises and keep them. I can rebuild trust.
Yes.
But if I do that same action again, the research has shown us it's impossible. You cannot rebuild trust if it's the same failure that happened before. It's a super small fraction of a percent that can be restored. It's not. You're done. It's time to move on. You're going to have to go someplace else and restart fresh. And I'm sorry, that's just you blew it, and you blew it again. So sometimes when we look at, these super toxic environments, it often means somebody needs to, get off the roster, and you need to bring in, some fresh eyes and fresh voices. Another piece to getting restoration going in a really highly toxic environment is actually going back to the foundation, as I talked a few moments ago. And what I mean by that is make sure everyone in the organization is truly bought in to the beliefs and values of the organization. And what we find is often if you can solve problems by being value-centered. In other words, how is it that our shared value can lead us to a better place in working together? How is what we are currently doing reflect our shared values? So you focus on what do we both hold true and our commitment to that. And that often will present the solutions of where to go. Or what it will bring to our attention is we don't share the same values. And one of us is in the wrong place. I've used the expression with some individuals, and it's a little sarcastic, but it's like, you need to go find your happiness, right? You're not happy here. You need to go find your happiness. I remember having that conversation with an employee a few years back. He was just walking around miserable as can be. The school had changed from how it had been when he had first come years ago. The demographics had changed, and he just was not a happy camper and was always reflecting, kind of the golden years of the school, 20, 30 years earlier. And he was just miserable. And I remember having a conversation with him. I said, maybe you need to just go find your happy place. And he did. And actually reached out to me sometime later and said, that was a hard conversation, but you were right. And he says, I needed to find my happy place. And life is short, Toby. It's like we get one shot at this, right? It's like, why remain in an environment where you're miserable? It's like, unless, there are just controlling factors around you that don't allow you to move. In most of the world today, at least within the Western world, there are opportunities galore. Move, get to a place where you can contribute and feel valued, but find a place where you share the values of the organization that you're working for, or the if you will, the community organizations that you're a part of.
Well, I love that so much, Dr. Travis. Like that carries a lot of wisdom. Actually, it has a lot of wisdom to it. Like that means we could be, good people, but we find ourselves in the wrong place. And then, in order for us to be functional and in order for us to be happy, we have to find our happy place. We have to find the good place that belongs to we ourselves as good people. Also, yeah, yes, wow. And talking about Trust ED, you have the foundation and you have services that you offer to people, which you've talked about earlier. But can you share with the listeners more what they could get from contacting you and working with you? What are the services that they could look up for, and also where can I get your book also to buy?
Well, the book is available on Amazon, so anywhere Amazon's available. And again, it's Trust Ed, The Bridge to School Improvement is the name of the book, or you can just Google my name, Dr. Toby Travis. Folks can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's where a lot of folks will find me. Or there's the website, trustedconsulting.org. So that's how they can find me. As far as services, again, I do assessments, professional development, executive coaching, strategic planning, short-term planning. I'm an instructional expert. So on the school side, if schools are looking at, okay, how do we elevate school improvement through our methods, our instructional methods, our assessment methods, learning environment, I mean, that's an area that I'm passionate about and can help work. We do, or I do, continual professional development for leadership teams. It's probably the work that I enjoy the most, is working with small teams. Usually it's division principals, a head of school, maybe a few board members and assistant principals. And we set ourselves away for a couple of days or a retreat and dig into the data from the 360 assessment and figure out, okay, what are the actions we need to take, and then continue to develop that and grow from that. So the professional development trainings are part of what I really enjoy doing. We've started to do a lot of this Zoom consulting. Is also just a coach. I do coaching cycles. So where a leader will just commit to, let's do this for 7 sessions. And let's get really specific. Let's drill down on an issue or a topic or a skill set that needs to be developed, and have the opportunity to provide them. Well, first, probably accountability, right? There's a big part of why do you get a coach? Why do you value having a third party looking in? Why you just get additional accountability, but also having the opportunity to. I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of successful practices in leadership. I've seen a lot of failures, and able to bring that perspective and also resources to help and support folks. But that's another service. And what I try not to do, Toby, I'm not a cookie cutter type consultant. I know there's men and women out there that they got a program, and even though, I do have a program, we have a framework, but even using the framework of Trust Ed and looking at those 6 components of trust and how that relates, but it looks different with every individual and every situation, every context, every school, every organization has its own unique footprint, if you will. And so customizing that work is always part of what I do. So.
Yeah, that's good. I'm going to place all of your information in the show notes of this episode. So I encourage everyone who is listening and would love to get across to Dr. Travis to contact him and get on that coaching service. It's available all around the world now through Zoom and through the internet. Basically, you could be talking with someone from Australia or someone
Oh,
from
sure.
New Zealand, anywhere in the world, basically. So you don't have to be in the US to get across to Dr. Travis, but from anywhere in the world, basically. Thank you so much for everything you taught me today. It's not only about the school improvement, but also how we could make use of all of these principles of being a trusted leader, even for our own life. Also, like trust ed or trust ed also could be used for us, as I know, in our own relationships, to trust better, to love better, and to become better people. Thank you so much, Dr. Travis.
Oh, my pleasure.
Hey there, podcast enthusiasts. Are you ready to add a little sparkle to your day? If you're loving the insightful conversations and captivating stories on Mirror Talk Podcast, here's a friendly nudge to hit that subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll never miss out on the empowering messages and thought-provoking discussions we bring to your ears. But wait, there's more. We're all about spreading positivity and inspiration, and you can be a part of it too. How? By sharing the love with your friends and family. Share this episode with your loved ones, and let's create a ripple effect of empowerment and growth together. And hey, if you've been enjoying what you hear, why not take a moment to leave us a glowing 5-star review? Your feedback fuels our passion to keep delivering content that resonates with you. So hit that subscribe button, share the love, and leave us a review. Let's keep the conversation going and spread the Mirror Talk magic far and wide. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, your support means the world to us.